Matthew Modine takes the lead role in tonight's movie as we follow the final flight of the Memphis Belle. That's at 8 o'clock. Top of the day now, 5 News.
This lunchtime on 5 News, 2 people are interrogated over the Bali terror bombings. Tony Blair is to make a common statement on the attack. And a 9th victim is shot dead by a sniper in the United States. Hello. 2 Indonesians are this lunchtime being interrogated by police over the bombs in Bali which killed almost 200 people. Investigators from Britain and the United States are flying to the scene of the atrocity. The Australian Prime Minister John Howard said there was mounting evidence that Al-Qaeda was behind the terrorist attack. Rob Smith reports.
In the middle of a nightclub and bar strip turned wasteland, British, Australian and American investigators are looking non-stop for mere fragments of evidence. And the question of which terrorists have the explosives expertise and materials for such a blast are both being answered and complicated. There are suggestions residue from military explosives has been found. But for Australia's Foreign Minister paying his respects at the site, and for his Prime Minister back home, the blame is easy to place.
There is, Mr. Speaker, mounting evidence of Al-Qaeda involvement together with Jamaah Ismailiyah in the attack. We will be moving, Mr. Speaker, as a government to have Jamaah Ismailiyah listed as a terrorist organisation in the United Nations as soon as possible.
The elderly leader of Jamaah Islamiyah will now be interviewed by Indonesian police, though Abu Bakar Bashir won't necessarily answer questions about Bali. He's volunteered to talk and plans only to discuss other allegations against him. At a mosque in Bali's capital, police did arrest 10 Pakistani nationals amid concern of why they were on the island. They were watched by intelligence teams, says this police spokesman. We've now asked them to explain who they are and what they're doing. But with 2 Indonesians arrested as well, officials are minding their words.
I myself do not want to pinpoint right now, because we have to work hard first to arrest the people involved, the perpetrators, the culprits.
Those who survived are still returning home to Britain this lunchtime, unable to stop telling their families how lucky they feel to be alive and be with them. Many talk of friends and fellow holidaymakers killed and maimed, and of the guilt and pain within them. Rob Smith, 5 News.
5's correspondent James Bays is in Bali. James, I gather you've been seeing some of the most depressing scenes imaginable today.
That's right, Rob. I've been at the main hospital and spent a lot of the day at the morgue accompanying the British consul there, Alan Marshall. He has an extremely difficult but very important job, which is liaising with the authorities there, trying to identify the bodies and passing that information on to the relatives. Today he's been trying to negotiate the release of some of the bodies so that the coffins can be released and then flown back to the UK. It seems there's quite a lot of bureaucracy involved, although some of the British victims have been formally identified. It's possible to formally identify their bodies because some of the others are very, very severely injured, and it might not be possible to injure them. But 7 have been formally identified, but the Indonesians are now asking for dental records or fingerprints before they release the bodies.
James, what can you tell us about the number of British people now thought to have died?
Well, the latest news from the British consul, who I spoke to in the last few minutes, is that we're talking about 15 people who they either have formally identified by visually identifying them or identified them by other means, possibly by jewellery that they were wearing, that sort of thing. 15 confirmed dead then. And then there are another 15 people who are missing, who no one has seen them since Saturday night. And of course, fears now really are growing for those people. However, I have to say the consul did warn us that it is possible that some of those people, there could be good news about them. Only yesterday there were 5 more people on that missing list, and in fact 5 people have turned up yesterday safe and well.
Now, British police investigators are due at the scene. What's happening there now?
Well, I was there a short time ago. The British police will be joining the FBI, who yesterday imposed a great big cordon around the area. This upset some Indonesians who want to be able to go to the scene, relatives of those who were injured and those who died, and local people who want to go to the scene. And for a time again today, the cordon was lifted, and people, the reporters and relatives of those who were injured and killed were allowed to go to the scene. Obviously that's slightly concerning for those who want to investigate this and want to find clues in the rubble. There is a problem that the scene may be contaminated by all of these people.
OK, James, thank you. The Prime Minister will make an emergency statement on the Bali bombings to MPs at the House of Commons this afternoon. Clive's political editor, Andy Bell, is at Westminster now. What's Tony Blair likely to say, Andy?
Well, I think it will be interesting to hear whether the Prime Minister will explicitly link this to Al-Qaeda. He didn't do that in his statement yesterday at Downing Street. He certainly set this firmly in the context of the war against terror, but he didn't mention Al-Qaeda by name. So it'll be interesting to hear if he goes down the road that the Australian government clearly is starting to believe that Al-Qaeda were behind this. But also in his statement yesterday, the Prime Minister talked about what action still needs to be taken at international level to ensure that these sorts of groups can't strike again. So it does sound rather as if he is going to be pressing for perhaps some kind of preemptive action. There was pressure on Indonesia before this bombing that they needed to deal with militant Islamic groups inside Indonesia, and I think we might see from the Prime Minister this afternoon him stepping up calls not just for that to happen in Indonesia, but also perhaps for preemptive action to be taken in other parts of the world as well.
Does that mean Iraq?
Well, Iraq is going to be the area where he is going to be criticised this afternoon, that's for sure. Even before this bombing, people were saying any military action against Iraq would be the wrong war against the wrong enemy at the wrong time, that it would simply be a distraction from pursuing Al-Qaeda terrorists, that there is still no real links between the Iraqi regime and Al-Qaeda Islamic militants. We're certainly going to hear that from Labour backbenchers this afternoon, probably from the Liberal Democrat leader Charles Kennedy as well, and Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, will have to convince his critics that it is worthwhile pursuing Iraq. At the same time, you can also pursue these Islamic groups.
Thanks, Andy. On to other news, and just over 1,000 A-level students have had their grades amended following the inquiry into the marking fiasco. Of those, 168 missed out on their first choice university. Another 73 didn't get to study the subject they had hoped to at any university. Papers from more than 91,000 candidates were checked, as Mark Bishop reports.
It was the biggest exams controversy ever to hit the country. 6 weeks of chaos after thousands of bewildered students had complained of poor grades. Sir William Stubbs, head of the Qualifications and Curriculum Authority, was sacked in the fiasco, and then an independent inquiry ruled that some exams have been deliberately downgraded. So, after a mammoth regrading operation by England's 3 exam boards, today there was general disappointment for many students, as only 1,945 of them discovered they'd had at least one improved grade. Claims of a whitewash were dismissed.
No, I don't see how I could be accused of that. I don't know of anything that happened throughout this process which the parties present said was in any way unfair, unreasonable or unjust. Remember, all of these reviews had present an independent observer from the teacher associations who reported to me confidentially about whether they felt the process had been conducted in the way that it should have been conducted and the way that I asked for it to be conducted.
The accusation then of a waste of time for many students who'd been waiting for better news. Over 90,000 of them had their papers sent back for remarking, but after they've been graded yet again, it's so far left 168 without a first choice university place, while 73 students have missed out on their first choice degree course. Many students will now have to take an unwanted gap year. Meanwhile, Education Secretary Estelle Morris will be hoping confidence in the examination system will now be restored. But that could take a long time after the confusion and despair for so many students who'll be looking forward to a good start in higher education. Mark Bishop, 5 News.
Well, Mark mentioned there the chief of the exams watchdog, Sir William Stubbs, the man sacked by the Education Secretary on the day the inquiry said exam boards had felt pressured by him to keep the pass rate at the level of previous years. Well, Sir William joins me now from Westminster. Sir William, what do you make of the number of papers that have been upgraded?
Oh, well, 3 weeks ago on your programme, I was saying that the numbers would be very small, that the system would be shown to have operated for the vast majority of students, to have operated satisfactorily. And now we've seen the numbers, I feel totally vindicated.
So you're saying there wasn't anything wrong with what the boards or yourself were doing. Do you think then that you should be reinstated?
Well, that's a matter for the Secretary of State. I think she acted peremptorily. I think she was under a lot of pressure, and she gave in to that pressure without seeing the evidence. I think she should have passed the evidence on to the regulator, and the regulator would have carried through an investigation. I do feel now that maybe it's the time for reconciliation, and I think that's a matter for her.
Whatever the result of this remarking, confidence in A-levels has been dented a severe blow, hasn't it?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. Quite unnecessarily dealt a severe blow.
What then do you think is the way forward for those exams?
Well, there is absolutely no alternative for the next 5, 7, 8 years for A-levels as reorganised now into AS and A2. There is no alternative. We have to continue with that. And in the main, it's been shown to have worked very well. Something like higher than 99% of candidates' results have been confirmed. So I think there'll be further refinements next year, but we'll stay with the system.
Sir William, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a short break right now, but still ahead this lunchtime, terror on the streets of Washington. Has the serial sniper claimed his 11th victim? And Roy Keane goes before the FA for that tackle. Plus, we'll have the day's weather prospects. That's 5 News after the break. This is 5 News. It is 12:13. Welcome back. A sniper has struck again in the United States. The unknown killer shot a woman in the head as she was putting shopping into her car in a suburb of Washington. Detectives are now investigating to see if she's the 11th person to be shot, the 9th to be killed by the sniper in the last 12 days. Roadblocks were immediately set up in the area, but the attacker seems to have escaped once more. Simon Clemerson reports.
Could the US sniper have struck again? Here a woman is shot dead outside a shopping centre. She was loading her car with her husband at the time.
Nobody knew what was going on, you know. People were standing there and we saw some crowd, so people went in to see what's the crowd, and suddenly you hear it's the sniper, it's a sniper. And, you know, you never think of it. You hear about it in the news, but you never think you're so close to it.
A serial sniper is being blamed for 8 deaths in the Washington area this month. 2 other people were left badly wounded in attacks. In all cases, as in this one, only a single shot was used. Police are investigating whether there's a link.
I know that the question in everyone's mind is this shooting related to the others that we've had in the area? It's too early to tell at this point. However, we are working it and investigating it with that potential in mind.
Roadside checks have been set up as the search is on for a cream-coloured van from which the attacker might have fired. Witnesses at some of the earlier shootings also reported a white or cream-coloured van or truck. There are still no suspects and no motives for the previous attacks. With whoever's behind them still at large, this is a community living in fear and on the edge. Simon Clemerson, 5 News.
More stories making the headlines. Surrey police investigating the murder of Millie Dowler say that on the day she disappeared, 2 men were seen with a schoolgirl beside the woods in Hampshire, where her body was eventually found. Millie went missing from Walton-on-Thames in March while she was walking home from school. Last week, her parents launched a charity called Millie's Fund to educate young people about personal safety. An Iraqi referendum looks certain to keep Saddam Hussein in power for another 7 years. He's the only candidate in a one-party state where dissent isn't tolerated. In 1995, Saddam got 99.96% of the vote, and this time he wants more. Voters have to say yes or no. His slogan was "Yes, yes, yes, Saddam." Men are being warned to watch out for their biological clocks, just like women. American scientists have found that men who delay having a family risk infertility as young as 35. It's because their sperm gets genetically damaged as they get older. The government is cracking down on people who mess around with fireworks in a bid to cut the number of injuries. It's released a new video as part of its campaign and will hit irresponsible users with £40 on-the-spot fines. Last year, there was a 50% rise in the number of teenagers injured on Guy Fawkes Night. And air bombs caused so many injuries, they are being banned. The Home Office is piloting the scheme in 4 areas and will target people caught throwing fireworks in the street. Well, joining me now is Melanie Johnson, who is Minister for Consumer Affairs. Minister, that's a pretty grim statistic, isn't it? A 50% rise in injuries for teenagers after year after year after year of warnings. Doesn't it mean all the previous campaigns have failed?
Well, I think what it shows is that a lot of the earlier campaigns were actually very successful, but we've had a dip in the last year or so, and we're particularly worried about younger teenagers because they are the people who indeed shouldn't even have access to fireworks because it's illegal to sell a firework to anybody who's under 18. But they're not only getting access to them, but they are also fooling around with them, causing a lot of distress in local neighbourhoods and often injuring themselves, which is obviously something we want to stop.
You're introducing on-the-spot fines, but they're only being piloted in 4 areas. Why not crack down hard everywhere in the country?
Well, there's already, under the law, there's already provision for fining people. It's just it can't be done on the spot. We're trying the pilot schemes to see how well they work out with a number of police forces. If this works out in practice and it's a useful tool, obviously we'll look to extend it quite widely next year, but we do want to see whether it works out this year first. And we're taking a step at the same time to ban air bombs, and those are the cause of about 3 million sales of actual air bombs each year, and those 3 million air bombs we reckon make about 30 million explosions because most of them are more than one shot, as it were.
Many people, though, suggest that perhaps what you should do is ban all fireworks except for at organised displays. Why don't you do that?
Well, first of all, I think lots of people do enjoy them and enjoy them safely, and there are huge traditions of buying them and using them on a private basis. But secondly, we believe there would just be an extensive black market, and it would drive a lot of things away from enforcement and regulation and licensing arrangements which we have, and make it much more difficult to do something to tackle the problems.
Minister, thank you. Manchester United captain Roy Keane is about to appear before the Football Association. He is charged with 2 counts of bringing the game into disrepute. They relate to comments in his controversial autobiography. 5's Ben Scotchbrook is at the hearing. He joins us live now from Bolton. What exactly then are these 2 charges, Ben?
Well, Rob, this is what all the fuss is about. Roy Keane's autobiography, or more exactly, page 231 of the autobiography. And that is what has brought the Manchester United skipper here to Bolton Wanderers ground today to face 2 charges of bringing the game into disrepute. All the fuss, of course, about that tackle on Alfie Inge Haaland back in a Manchester City, Manchester United derby in April last year. Let's have a look at that tackle now. At the time, the tackle was considered so monstrous that Roy Keane was banned for 3 games. But then he talks about that tackle in the autobiography, and on page 231, having said that it was a conclusion to a long-running feud he had with Alfie Inge Haaland, he says, "I'd waited long enough, I hit him hard, take that," he said. Slightly more colourful language than that, it has to be said. The FA today has to decide whether he improperly motivated tackle, that's what he did, and whether he's now profited from that tackle by writing about it.
So Ben, what's his defence?
I'm sorry, the defence, of course, is that there are 2 possible theories that he may offer. One is that he meant to carry out the tackle, of course, but that he never meant to injure Alfie Inge Haaland. The other one is that he didn't write those words, that they were ghostwritten for him, paraphrased by Eamon Dunphy, the ghostwriter on the autobiography. And today, lawyers will hear the evidence from witnesses, including Mr. Dunphy. They'll review the video evidence, and then they'll have to decide what the real story is. We also know that Sir Alex Ferguson is in there offering, one assumes, true loyal support. The FA, as I say, will review all the evidence, and then they'll decide whether he has brought the game into disrepute, whether perhaps he should be given a hefty ban, and whether perhaps he may be banned for several games.
OK, Ben, thank you very much indeed. Let's stay with football, but on a rather more legitimate basis. Michael Owen says England are looking to send out a warning to their rivals in their upcoming Euro 2004 qualifier against Macedonia. England are expected to win easily, but Owen says it's important the team turn on the style tomorrow night. Andy Richardson reports.
Once again, Michael Owen was England's match winner at the weekend. Not for the first time, an Owen goal had papered over the cracks of an otherwise indifferent team performance. But having escaped the hostility of Slovakia for the slightly more serene environment of Southampton, the Liverpool striker says there's a renewed sense of unity in the squad after their shared experiences in Bratislava.
All the lads were just so relieved to get out of there and get home and have 3 points in the bag, and let's concentrate on playing on a nice pitch and in front of our home fans, you know.
Sol Campbell missed Saturday's game through illness, but he's back and should start against Macedonia tomorrow.
You know, we're not going to take it lightly. You know, obviously they're a lesser country than us, but you know, we're going to still respect them and get on with our game.
Macedonia have never qualified for a major finals. Eriksson knows nothing less than a comfortable win for his side is expected. Andy Richardson, 5 News.
Scotland are in friendly action tonight. Bertie Vogt's rejuvenated side play Canada in Edinburgh. Vogts and his team answered their critics with a crucial 2-0 win over Iceland at the weekend. It was Vogt's first win as Scotland manager, and it put the Scots top of their Euro 2004 qualifying group. Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas have revealed this morning that they are expecting another baby. It'll be the couple's second child. They already have a 3-year-old son called Dylan. The new baby is due next spring. And just before I go, an incredible piece of scientific research, and it's going to be pretty worrying for some famous names. It appears that redheads feel more pain than blondes or brunettes. Doctors in the US have found that for the likes of Nicole Kidman and Chris Evans, it takes 20% more anaesthetic to knock them out for an operation. Apparently they did the study by giving electric shocks to patients with ginger hair. So I'm afraid we haven't been able to prove it for ourselves here. And that's all from me for now. I'll be back with a reminder of the top stories at 1 o'clock. Kirsty's here at 5:30 and 7:30. Bye for now.
Five Weather, sponsored by Vino's.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, some rather wet and wild conditions across parts of southern Britain. Further north that we go, we see that cloud opening up and some rather pleasant, calm and sunny weather anywhere north of the borders. If we take a look at today's satellite picture, you can see this massive cloud just sitting off southwestern Britain. It's a large area of low pressure, just moving its way in a northeasterly direction. To you and me, that means a lot of very heavy rain and even some gale force winds later on this evening and into tomorrow. Further north you go, that cloud opens up, some rather pleasant weather. If we take a look at that rain in more detail, you can see these rather bright patches. They're the ones that we want to watch out for. Those downpour conditions will just move their way in a northeasterly direction, as I said. And this area of low pressure producing those very breezy and gale force conditions along the channel later on. Now those driving conditions may also be hazardous thanks to that very heavy rain. So again, a good deal of rain across the whole map. As I said, that cloud opening up anywhere north of the borders, we may see the odd sight of some sunshine. Temperatures not too bad at all, managing just to get into double figures in the north, 11 degrees. Anywhere in the south, maybe 13 or 14. But in those wet and wild conditions, it'll feel rather grey and miserable.
Five Weather, sponsored by Vino's.